Hello, everyone. I'm pretty sure that I've never had such an amazing introduction before. Thank you for that. Happy to be here. Happy to be closing AXCON this year. Missed a lot of you over the last year before we got to do this again. The topic that I want to introduce to you today, how to truly connect with all of your audience without leaving anyone behind, is one that is particularly dear to me. You'll figure out why as we go through the session today together. And my goal is really to be able to share some thoughts with you about the very idea of what we're doing right now, which is communicating to a group of people, arguably sometimes a rather large group of people. We've got thousands of people attending AXCON this year, so clearly a large audience, and the necessity to make sure that the way that we communicate to those folks is actually inclusive and recognizes the needs, expectations, preferences of different people based on different types of circumstances. So as we get started, and because I wanted to embody a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about through this session, Michael will be dropping a link in chat to a PDF document. Yes, a PDF document that is accessible, that was made accessible so that you can follow along. So if you require a document that you can listen to as I'm talking, if you would rather be able to sort of foresee what's going on, you'll be able to have your own version of it, and you won't depend on me changing slides or things like that. So so I'm assuming that Michael will put that in chat if it's not already done, and you'll be able to follow along. With that said, I'm going to share my screen, and we will get started. And the way that I want to get started with this is telling you a bit of a story. And that story is about how one of the ways in which I discovered accessibility, and that particular one takes me back to 2003, so 20 years ago, almost to the day, really. And I'm doing my very first public speaking gig at a conference in Montreal, where I live. And it's a very small room, not a lot of people. And I'm telling people what I know about accessibility, and arguably I don't know much at that point, but I'm really proud of what I know, and I'm really nervous and excited about doing this. And as I'm going through the presentation, I figure it's a small room, like there's like 20 people. I'm not going to use that microphone. That would be weird. I'm going to feel comfortable using the microphone, so I'm just going to leave it, because my voice carries. I won't need it. I'm sure it's going to be fine. And I'm talking about, different things like images and, alt text and things like that, like things that we were talking about 20 years ago when it came to accessibility. And at some point during, like a couple minutes in the presentation, I hear someone in the back of the room just saying, "Mike, please." And I'm like, who the hell is Mike? Like, what are you talking about? Like looking for a Michael or something. And then I realized when the person repeats it, that what they're asking for is for me to use the microphone, not a particular mic, but just a microphone, because they can't hear me all that well. And that was a defining moment for me, that to this day still resonates, because it's probably one of the very first times that I realized that I was making assumptions about other people. And my job back then was web development, web design, that sort of thing. And we were constantly making assumptions about what people needed or what they liked or this or that, as a lot of you know. And I can trace back that memory to the first time that someone actually told to my face that my assumptions were wrong, and that I needed to be more cognizant, be smarter about what it is that people needed. And I'm telling you this story because what I want to talk about today is, how do we communicate to a group in a way that is inclusive? We've seen a lot of presentations this year. We see a lot of presentations all the time. We've seen tons of presentations over the last 3 years, in particular over Zoom and other platforms like that. And I'm sure that you've had your share of presentations where people made assumptions about a lot of things. Telling you things like, as you can see on my screen right now, or not turning on captions, or using a graph packed with colors that you can't really tell if you're colorblind, which I happen to be. That's one of my disabilities, one of my many disabilities. And as we were going through the pandemic, and actually it started before that, but as we were going through the pandemic, it became even clearer to me that there needed to be some guidance around how to present in a way that was more accessible. We've got all the guidelines in WCAG, we've got all that good stuff that we use, that we know and love. But when it comes to how do we present in a way that's accessible, there's really not that much out there. If you do a little bit of research for that, you'll find articles here and there that are basically all saying the same things. And there's one document at W3C at the EO working group that's really good, but it gives you like maybe 15, 20 different tips to think about. And that's about it. There's really not much. So I wanted to work through that, and I wanted to document a lot of the things that we could do so that speakers get better at doing this, so that anyone who communicates professionally or communicates to a group would learn how to incorporate a lot of the things that we do with WCAG, but in a completely different environment, which is the spoken word. So this is what this is going to be about today. It's going to be about that topic in general. And through that, whether you are yourself a public speaker, someone who gives a presentation in a meeting room, a salesperson, someone in marketing, in HR, in communication in general, if you carry or if you convey a message on behalf of yourself or somebody else, this stuff is for you, basically. And if you are someone who tends to attend sessions, it might be for you also to realize some of the things that you should be asking for when you see speakers failing you. So that's the idea, basically, around what we're going to be doing today. Also, hopefully, you're excited about that, because I sure am. So let's start with just setting up the stage a little bit, like setting the stage for that entire conversation. Some of the statistics that you know already, some of which might be a little bit more surprising to you. So most of us know that about a quarter of working age adults in the United States have a disability, self-identify as having at least one disability. So that's 26% of the population, a little bit more than 1 out of 4, which is already, a significant number of people. We also know from the American Institutes for Research that that particular group controls over $500 billion every year in terms of after-tax disposable income. So $504 billion a year is what they control. And that's not even, considering what we call the disability market, which is folks with disabilities, but also their loved ones, the people that care about them, the people that could be swayed one way or another if they heard that their friends, people that they appreciate, were being, prejudiced against or neglected or excluded, and who could decide to just go to a competitor of yours because you're just not, living up to their expectations. That particular percentage goes up to 53% if you consider research that has been done by Rich Donovan in a book called Unleash Different. So, sizable number of people, sizable number of amount of money. But what we don't think about as much is people that don't necessarily have a disability or identify as having one, but are just getting older. We like to share data, and we've heard that data in the conference this year about seniors, for instance, 16, 17% of seniors, people being 65 years and older. I've worked with that data for a long time. I much prefer to work with a different piece of data, which is that 83.1 million Americans as of last year are between the age of 50 and 69. Like people that are, my bracket, and I'm 51. So my bracket is still, for some of you, like I'm ancient, I get that. But for a lot of other people, let me just make that a little bigger for everyone's benefit. So I'm right here now in the 83.1 million, and hopefully, yeah, there we go. Okay, so yeah, so 50 to 69, that particular bracket, are people that are certainly going to feel the impact of aging, but they're still very much active professionally. And those are the people who are in our meetings, they are in our boardrooms, they're in our sessions, they attend all these different things, and they're somewhere on the path to be a little less capable of doing certain things. I know I can speak for myself. My hearing isn't as good as it used to be. My sight definitely isn't as good as it used to be. I get tired more quickly. I can't function at the same rate as I used to for a long period of time. Like I need my rest. Like there's all these different things. I can feel the effect of aging on my abilities in general. And those folks are not really accounted for, generally speaking. So when you compound all these people, it's about a quarter of the population again. Now, there's an overlap, of course, with people with disabilities, but it's a significant group. And when we look at people that are over the age of 65, when we account for people that are getting older and we account for people with disabilities, we are way over half the population. So when we talk about making a presentation that is accessible to people, we're not just talking about 2 or 3 random people that in a room that might have a disability. We're talking about half the room, basically, who will struggle with one thing or another, depending on circumstances, depending on their own challenges. And while those things are going to be different from one person to another, they're all going to matter for that person. And the more you are aware of those things, the more you can flag them, the more you can feel or prevent them from happening, the more people will love you as a result of that. The more you're going to be able to connect with those people. And if your goal is to convince people about something, whether you're carrying a message or you're trying to sell something or sharing an idea or whatever, the likelihood of you doing that is much higher if you don't piss people off just because you don't know how to speak to them in a way that makes them feel valued, respected, recognized, seen, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the idea. That's how I want to kind of set that stage there. And I want to have a conversation about money a little bit, which is a bit of an awkward conversation, but one that is, I think, necessary, especially if you are one of those folks who are monetizing the spoken word. Like if you are someone who speaks and gets paid for that, if you are someone who wants to get paid for that, if you are someone who is selling and you get paid based on how much or how well you can sell, this is the kind of thing that you need to pay attention to. If you're trying, and it's not always like selling something or, I mean, it's sometimes selling an idea. It's not so much as selling a product in some cases. We all pretty much sell something most of the time. So the question is, how much money might you be leaving on the table every year if you don't pay attention to those things? So I'm going to ask Michael to drop another link in chat. As I was going through preparing this material there, I figured I would put together a page on my website that would give you a bunch of bonus content because there's only so much I can cover in the time that we have. So, so that link points to a dedicated page for AxeCon, so inclusive.ca/ax-con, and you'll find in there a calculator. So I'm going to show you what it looks like here, broadly speaking. But if you want to play with that as I'm going through this, you feel free to do that. Play with it. The idea behind this calculator is basically looking at how many people you speak to in a year. What is the percentage of those folks that you actually convert into a client? And by client, I mean, it can mean anything. For some people, it's actually like a paying client. For other people, it might be a new follower. It might be someone who becomes a raving fan of yours. Like, it doesn't really matter, but how many people do you convert to your idea when you're talking to them? And what I want to demonstrate through this, and hopefully you agree with my logic here, is that we can put a number on how much we're missing or losing every year if we're not paying attention to inclusion. So let's say, as an example, because I do that, like I speak in front of people, I get paid to do that. So it is something that is very clear in my head. And so, your mileage will vary there, but the idea that we can quantify what that looks like sounds pretty solid to me. So let's say, and these are numbers just made up so that we can easily see the big picture. So the first question that the calculator asks for is, how many audience members do you speak to in a year on average? So let's pretend that we're talking about a speaker here. So let's say that in a year, I speak to, in front of, say, 1,000 people, which seems easy enough if you speak at AxeCon, knowing that we're attracting probably around 28 or to 30,000 people this year to the conference. So however many of you are currently in the session with me, and however many more will watch the recording later, 1,000 is probably way under the reality here, but let's just play with that number. And then on average, what percentage of your audience do you convert into clients? So let's say I'm being conservative. I'm going to say maybe 3%. Maybe 3% of the people that are in the room will take me on my offer, will follow me on social media, will do whatever. So I'm just going to put in 3 here to get a sense of what that looks like. And then you ask yourself, what is the average value of typical client's engagement with you? Sometimes it's free. If it's just a follower on Twitter, of course, there's not money related to that directly, though there might be. But if you are selling a service, could be hundreds or thousands of dollars. So let's just say, for the sake of the example again, that an average engagement is $1,000. So let's put the, whoops, not here, in the other one. So $1,000. And then the idea here is that if you look at, well, actually, you know what? Let me just move to this here because I can't do math. That's another one of my challenges in general. So let me just move to this page here, and I can show you that page while we're doing that too. So that's the page I was talking about, the dedicated page. So if I go here in this little calculator, and I put in my 1,000 people at a 3% conversion rate with an average of $1,000, that would basically mean that I convert, I probably have a projected revenue of $30,000 through going through that particular exercise. Let's say that I make that a little bit more exciting. Let's say that in a year, I speak to about 10,000 people, viewers, followers, people in conference rooms or whatnot, and my conversion rate is say 5%. I'm talking about $500,000 in this case. If you agree with me that 20% of the room is likely to disengage with you because you can't connect with them properly, because you said something that might be offensive to them, because you are making assumptions about what they can or can't do, and that annoys them. Like you're going to lose some people if you don't pay attention to those things. I feel like 20% is a pretty fair number. You might think it's higher, you might think it's lower, but let's play with 20% just for the sake of it. If I did that, that would mean that year on $5,000, $500,000 of revenue, I probably left 20% on the table. So that's another $100,000 that I could have made there if only I had paid attention to those things. Convert that logic to bidding to like filling out an RFP, for instance, to get a new contract or getting a new client, like however you want to convert that. The math still works. For you, it might be 10%. Maybe you're thinking, oh, that can't be more than 10%. Even if it was 10%, it would still be $50,000 off of that $500,000 that I was looking at with those numbers here. If your offering is something that's $5,000, for instance, again, you can do the math and you can see that the numbers get really big really quickly. So there's an actual cost, even though it's really hard to control. There's an actual cost to exclusion, really, and it's hard for us to be very clear about what that is. But there's clearly a consequence to not paying attention to those things. And if you're making a living, or if your living depends on your ability to sell whatever it is that you sell, you should pay attention to those things. That was my thinking as I was going through all of these things in the last couple of years, and seeing so many presentations where people were just making those assumptions and not being mindful of differences, and thinking that their one-size-fits-all approach would work for everyone, which clearly never really works. So there's one part, right? So the money aspect is certainly significant, and it speaks to a lot of people. The thing is, what I realized going through research like that was that when you ask most people if they're inclusive, they're going to be very confidently telling you that they are, which really amuses me because I'm having those conversations with speakers that I just saw speak like 5 minutes before, and like, oh yeah, of course. And I'm thinking of all the things that they did. They don't realize that that they really weren't as inclusive as they thought they were. So I want to play a little game with you here. So Michael will queue up a couple of questions in chat, and so 6 questions. You can see some of them on the screen right now. Again, I'm going to make that a little broader so that you can also read on my screen if that's what you want to do. The first question is, and for each of those questions, it's a 5-choice answer, right? So it's either going to be never, rarely, sometimes, usually, or always. Pretty simple. So you ask a question, and you just you self-assess yourself. Be honest with yourself, of course, and like, do you do that thing? Never, rarely, sometimes, usually, always. So the first, and keep those answers on your end, because we're going to tally that up after and see what that gives us. So the first question is, do I systematically avoid using massive ice training blocks of text that can feel both off-putting and daunting for most people? Think about a presentation that you might have done, for instance. Are you presenting like this big wall of text that people are supposed to read while you're talking? Are you presenting that big wall of text and it's a little small, so it's harder to read? Like do you count or leverage that as a way to get your message across? So again, you ask never, you wonder, do you do that never, rarely, sometimes, usually, always? Second question is, do I systematically use an inclusive writing style that leverages active voice and relies on basic plain language principles? We hear about plain language all the time. We hear about the use of active voice. Do you actively do that? Never, rarely, sometimes, usually, always. Third question. Do I systematically identify insufficient contrasts by running my content and color combinations through grayscale filters? I'm not even asking about, color contrast checkers, because that's a little complicated for most people, but just running a grayscale filter to see if you can still determine content from the one content from another, for instance. So do you do that? Never, rarely, sometimes, usually, always. Question number 4. Do I systematically avoid depending on the use of color alone to convey information presented on slides, marketing collaterals, etc.? So do you depend on color alone to convey information? Do you have a pie chart and we're supposed to determine what is what based on the colors that you use? Do you have error messaging that is completely dependent on the use of the color red? Like, are you doing stuff like that in your content, in your materials? Would you never do that, or do you do it rarely, sometimes, usually, or always? And then do I systematically reformulate questions or statements coming from the audience before I provide an answer? Let's say you're speaking to a group of people, you're in a in-person environment, and someone in the front asks a question, you hear the question, and you start replying right away. Or do you reformulate what has been said so that everyone can benefit from the question so that they can get context about what you're talking about? Again, never, rarely, sometimes, usually, or always. And then finally, do I systematically avoid asking for specific forms of interaction, such as stand up if, whatever, or by show of hands without offering alternatives, making some people feel singled out because they might not be able to stand up, or they might not be able to raise their hands high enough to be seen, or simply move their upper limbs, for instance. So would you never do that, or do it rarely, sometimes, usually, or always? So hopefully, as we're going through these questions, and this is just a subset of over 200 questions like that I've gathered over the last couple of years, that allow us to gauge just how well we're doing from that standpoint. So again, if you go to inclusive.ca/axcon, you'll see a little box in there for a self-assessment test. This is a sample of all those questions. You can get for free, completely free. You can get a 25 question questionnaire, basically, and you can gauge where that puts you. And that's what we're gonna try to do together right now. So assuming that you did write down the answers that you had, what I want you to do now is just tally up the points. So every time that you said you answered never, you get 0 points. Sorry about that. If you answered rarely, you get 1 point. So every rarely gives you 1 point. Every sometimes gives you 2 points. Every usually gives you 3 points. And every always gives you 4 points. We have 6 questions. So it's anywhere between 0 and 24, right? So if you had 6 questions at always, that would be 6 times 24. And if you had 6 questions at 0, it would be 0. So based on where you stand with that number, it puts you on a scale. So again, something that I've put together these past couple of years, that I call the inclusive speaking model, basically. Going from instinctive to inspired, to involved, to invested, to inclusive. So depending on the amount that you got, the number that you got, you would fall somewhere on that spectrum. So let's say you had 17 points. That would put you in the involved category. If you had 5 points, you'd be in the instinctive category. And to give you a sense of what that means, because it's nice to have a label on things, but what does that mean really? This PDF again that I'm going through, that you can have a copy of if you want to, gives you a high-level perspective as to what that means. So Instinctive speaker, as an example, would be someone who hardly knows anything about inclusion principles and disabilities, typically don't even know to think about those concepts in the first place, and will need a lot of handholding even for the most basic considerations. Honestly, that's a lot of speakers out there that you see in conferences all the time. I mean, we've seen those folks many, many times over, and we've actually been those folks. I was that person 20 years ago when I didn't take that microphone. And we all begin there. The inspired speaker, they're growing their understanding of inclusion principles through learning styles and other techniques. So they recognize that one size fits all don't work. They understand, that some people prefer like a more of like a visual or auditory or kinesthetic way of learning. They acknowledge that we're on a spectrum for those things. Like they start getting those ideas, but they're clueless about what accessibility or disability still means at that point, and even what to do about that. If you got into the involved speaker category, then you've integrated basic inclusive communication techniques, tips, and tricks into your content, into your delivery, but you probably still need help from experts just to go beyond the basics. I find that a lot of people in our space are there. They know that they should be doing these things, but how do they get there? How do they do that? How do they make their documents accessible? That's a different story oftentimes. The invested speaker are the ones that can complete most of the basic and intermediate inclusive communication tasks independently, and they're increasingly recognized also as people to ask difficult questions to when they're developing material and content, for instance. And then if you ended up being in that last category with our sample, then you're probably recognized as a go-to person for anything related to inclusion, accessibility, and people will come to you, and you probably coach other people to do these things. So there's that model. There's that sort of journey that people go through in their speaking, career when it comes to that particular aspect of inclusion. Again, you can go and play with that on inclusive.ca/axcon. There's that self-assessment test part that you can take, and you'll get like a bunch of different results and a little report at the end of your questions, so that you can get a sense of where you are. And if you take the test multiple times, you'll eventually see where you average out. Should give you a pretty good idea of two things: where you're at, and a bunch of ideas about things that you might do to get better, because that's the whole point of the exercise, is to learning about our flaws so that we become more inclusive as we're doing all these things. Now, having said all that, here, okay. It would make no sense to talk about any of this if it wasn't with the idea that we need to put audience members with disabilities at the center of that conversation. So the next couple of pages in the document, I'm not going to go through in detail now. My whole goal is for you to go and look at that content and make what you will of it. But in this document I'm sharing, and I'm going to make it just a little smaller so you can see the bigger picture. If you can see the screen, of course, that is, but I'm going to describe what's there. So I have a slide with 3 different characters, like illustrations of different characters. A person that has, well, I'm going to say blonde hair, but like I said, I'm colorblind. I have no idea really. Whose gender is not clear. I have a person in the middle with a big brown beard and brown hair, and I have an older lady apparently with grayish white hair on the right-hand side. And there are 2 quotes on the slide, on the page. The first one says, "Speakers, please use the microphone. You're not as loud as you think. How so wide do you have to make the text so small and so hard to read?" The other bubble reads, how hard can it be for speakers to provide sufficient color contrast for text and graphics? And why do they keep sharing information based on color alone? And then the third one says, why aren't speakers relying on powerful visuals more to support the message of their slides instead of boring bullet points and big walls of text? A couple of things I've talked about. Very basic examples of what we need to pay attention to. And, this is a journey, right? So it's never perfect. We never get everything right. We make mistakes all the time, but the idea is to learn from that. The idea is to become more and more aware about these things. And when you notice a flaw in what you're doing, to, act on it that way. So in order to help you do that, this document also shares, in the next couple of pages that follow, I'm introducing you to 3 personas that I've created 8 different personas that represent different types of disability, people with disabilities. And I'm sharing 3 in this document, but if you go to the bonus content page on my site, you can download the entire document with all 8 of them. And each one basically gives you 5 do's and 5 don'ts. So posters to about things that you could be doing or things that you should avoid to be more inclusive of someone like, say, Izumi in this case, who is someone who has dyslexia. And as an example, you should always minimize the text on the screen and consider that more visually engaging ways or compelling ways to tell your story instead. And something that you should never do is use massivized training blocks of text that can feel both off-putting and daunting for most people. Like, those are examples of what you could do. If you're familiar with the UK posters, Designing for Accessibility, this is the exact same idea, but applied to a different context with, of course, different tips and tricks to learn more about these different things. On top of these do's and don'ts, I'm also offering you another page, another part of the document that has 10 considerations to be more inclusive of someone who has dyslexia, someone who's dyslexic, when you're presenting in front of people. As an example, let's say here, use an inclusive writing style that leverages active voice and relies on basic plain language type principles. Again, something that I've mentioned earlier. Or avoiding to apply underline or italic styles that can make reading harder by causing letters and words to run together. Like, things like that are going to, if you avoid them or if you pay attention to them, you're going to make it easier for folks to engage, to participate, to feel like they're part of what's going on. So Izumi is one of them. I'm also sharing something about Nick, which is an audience member who is colorblind. Same idea again, always, never, do's and don'ts, and then 10 questions to ask yourself about, like, do you do those things or should you avoid doing those things? And finally, there's one for Vivian also, who represents an audience member who is getting older. And in her case, again, 5 do's, 5 don'ts, 5 things to ask about. So again, there's 8 of them. There's another one that speaks to deafness. There's one that speaks to vestibular disorders, so motion sickness. There's another one that speaks to autism. There's another one that speaks to blindness. And there's another one that speaks to, I forget, but there's 8 of them. Again, through that research, also something that I started doing last year was, because again, the idea was, it doesn't make any sense to do all of this and never ask people what they feel or what they think about it. So I started asking folks 5 interview questions about their experience attending live, in-person, or virtual events. And I've been publishing those interviews on that same website over the last years. I've done 50 so far. You might be able to recognize some of the faces. Again, I'm going to make that a little bigger for you. If you can see the screen, you can recognize some of the faces there very randomly. I'm going to name a few here. So Jamie and Lion is one that you might recognize. Meryl K. Evans. You have Leonie Watson. You've got Nicholas Steenhout. You've got Sam Heavens. You've got Sherry Byrne Aber. You've got, let's say, who else do I see here? Glenda Sims. You got a bunch of people, basically. Kate Kalsovich, last week was the last guest that I had. So you've got 50 people like that basically shared their perspective as people with disabilities and how they experience live, in-person, or virtual events, and what they appreciate also. So what are the challenges? What are the things that they appreciate? So if you are interested in learning more about how you can be more inclusive, you can learn from them directly, again, by going through that content that I'm offering you on the website. The other thing that I want to say also, and I figure it would be a great place to do that, is I'm always looking for more people to interview and collect the information, amplify their voices. So if you are one of those folks who would love to share your perspective as well, just reach out to me. Again, on that page, inclusive.ca/axcon, you'll find a little link to a form. You fill out that form, we get in touch, and we discuss those things. So yeah, I mean, it would be great if you were interested in doing that. My goal is to do hundreds of them. I've only done 50 so far. So if we want to build like a really big repository of tips and tricks and techniques that we can use and we can help, we can leverage to help others get better at this. This is another aspect of accessibility that we can transform by collectively, contributing information in that capacity. And as I'm wrapping things up, so I've been talking about, this research, all this stuff. Some of you are aware of this because I've been talking about it all day. But all this research led to a book that I'm publishing, that I'm launching today. So the book is called The Inclusive Speaker. It is really meant for speaking professionals, communication professionals, HR people, marketing people, sales folks, leaders in organizations, people who speak in front of their team, people who speak in front of people, basically, and teaching about these different things, teaching about why this matters, teaching about the different tips and tricks that you can apply, things you should pay attention to. Like all these things I've talked about and more are condensed in this 360 some page book that came out today as in a Kindle format, available in the US, Canada, UK, France, India, Mexico. There's a bunch of places really where it's available. And the print version is coming out next Monday, assuming that the publisher, does what they say they will do. So it will be available as well as a paperback early next week. I would love for you to grab a copy of it. I'm selling it at $1.99 as a launching price, which is like one cheap coffee, I guess, today. And if you do, then you're contributing to making that a bestseller, which really would help push this idea further and get in front of more people who desperately need to know about those things so that they can be more inclusive themselves. So that's my call to action to you. Looking into that. If you can't or are not interested in that book, that's fine too. A lot of that content is available for free on the site. So a lot of these resources are there. I acknowledge that not everyone is comfortable with that. I acknowledge that not everyone is comfortable with purchasing on Amazon, for instance. I've had a bunch of people ask me today, is it going to be available elsewhere? Probably. Honestly, I don't know. Like, I'm figuring out these things as I go. The whole publishing, self-publishing thing, I discover one thing and then I do it and then I go to the next one. So going to keep working on this for a while, of course. So I'm assuming it's going to be available in other platforms as well. But for the time being, it's really only there. And I hope a lot of you will look into it and will find it interesting, because that's the entire goal. So I'm seeing that my clock says 36 seconds before my time is over. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to bring it back to Michael to see if we have any questions in chat.
Yes, we do, Denis. Also, you've got some fans already of a lot of people who's purchased the book, and you've got a lot of excitement about the price at $1.99. They thought $1.99. They first thought you meant $199, but $1.99, and a lot of people are saying that's a deal.
I don't think I'm that good, but
I always talk about how it's a crazy Denis sale. Crazy Denis sale. So all right. So how about we ask some of the questions that are in chat for you, Denis? Our first question comes from a participant. Do you have any advice on how to pivot when the needs of an audience are a little different than you'd planned, or realize that you might have excluded someone? So any thoughts on pivoting?
Yeah. So it's a skill, right? It's a skill to learn to read the room. If you are able to do that, and you notice at some point that people don't seem to engage with what you're doing, so full disclosure, Michael and I work on a daily basis as trainers for DQ Systems. So we run into that all the time. I mean, you're talking about something and you think you're interesting, and like no one answers back to you, or like all the cameras are turned off and you can't really tell if they're engaged or not. So you have to learn to, pick up on the cues that are there and work with them. I think it's not so much that you need to learn to pivot, though arguably you do. It's about planning ahead of time so that you have things to pivot to. I think that's really what's more important here. Again, one of the resources that I'm sharing in that page, inclusive.ca/axcon, is a template to plan for those things. So if you're planning for like an inclusive speaking, game plan, basically, you will be thinking about different things. Let's say, for example, that your lecture goes a little longer than you thought. I mean, maybe you were well-intentioned and you're like, I'm going to talk for like 10 minutes and I'm going to have them do this exercise for 15 and they're going to debrief for another 5 after that. Whole thing will be like 25-ish minutes or so. And then you realize that you've spent 15, 20 minutes talking. One of the things that you could do in terms of pivoting in that case is not say, by all means, not say, I'm going to cut down on the exercise and just move on to the next thing, because there's nothing more soul crushing for everyone else to just see, oh, okay, so I just have to wait passively again. But instead, learn to work with your content so that you're going to either cut out something towards the end to still acknowledge and make room for the moment where they get to participate, and make sure that it's not about you, it's about them ultimately. So in terms of pivoting, I think it's mostly a question of having a bunch of ideas in your back pocket and ask yourself those questions ahead of time. Like what happens, like what will I do if this or this happens, and have something ready for you to sort of jump up to or down to or next to or whatever, so that you have that plan. It's not the pivot as much as the planning for the pivot that's important, I think.
Great point. Someone wants to ask, you mentioned those 50 interviews that you have done and you continue to do there. Was there something that you learned that surprised you the most when you did those first 50 interviews for the book? Was there something that really said you were like, I never thought of it that way based on the interviews that you had?
A lot of things did surprise me. Again, we all make assumptions about so many different things. I don't want to single anybody out, but a good friend of mine was interviewed talking about traumatic brain injury, and the answers were very different than I expected. Like most people, at some point, like I get a little overconfident with what I know and what I think people will say. And every now and then you run into someone asking or telling something, and like I've never actually considered that particular thing, or like a surprisingly high number of people that are blind, for instance, and not conveniently, but I mean casually, speak to the fact that they're visual thinkers. That is something that was very interesting and surprising to me. People talking about like hard of hearing and talking about how the craptions that we keep hearing about, to them actually work quite well, and they're content with it because they'd rather have that than having nothing. Like we see so many people, and you're rightfully so, talk about how automated captions are just not good enough, but a lot of people are just happy to settle with that rather than having nothing because we didn't have a budget for an actual caption, like human captioner. So there are things like that come across. I mean, almost every single interview brings up a point that is surprising one way or another, which is why I love to do them so much, because it's a wealth of information about understanding humans and how they work and how they think and how the coping mechanisms that they develop because they have no other choice if they want to participate. And it just reinforces this idea that it is our responsibility to make that job easier on them, not make it harder for them to, like, I don't want people to have to be creative. I want people to just be able to be there and enjoy the moment instead of trying to work hard to just enjoy what the rest of us are taking for granted. So most of them actually do that or give me that kind of value, I say.
Yep. So I'm going to answer the one question, and Denis can help me with this. Somebody asked about your purple shirt, and you have to realize, ladies and gentlemen, when Denis puts on that purple shirt, it's kind of like having Daniel Craig wear a suit. It looks really good because it's on Denis. But someone asked about, could they get Denis' purple shirt? There is going to be a survey for AxCon, and if you fill that out, you will be in the running to get one of those purple shirts. Now, again, I cannot promise anyone that it will look as good on you as it does on Denis. He's just got the body for it, but that's one of those kind of things. By the way, I do want to also say a lot of the participants wanted to thank you for also coming up with a paperback version of the book, because a lot of people would like it in their corporate libraries to help individual leaders. And that was one of the questions, is about what kind of strategies do you use, or should our participants use, to get this message that you're talking about out to the general business leaders? Because how many corporations do we have CEO presenting to their companies, or et cetera, that a lot of your tips could help the message even better? What kind of thoughts, or what are things that you've done to help spread that message about inclusive speaking?
Yeah. I don't see a lot of difference between trying to convince someone that inclusive speaking is important than about making your website more accessible. I mean, it's the same battle, really. It's about getting people to understand that not everybody experiences the thing the way that they do. So for a lot of people, that's what that is. So, all the answers that you've heard before about, try to make the business case for it, like the societal business case, the economic one, the business one, the legal one, the financial one, like whatever. I mean, all these different aspects are all good ways to get into some people's minds about this, plant that little seed that can hopefully at some point grow. I find that with leaders who tend to be older, playing that 50 to 69 card is actually quite good, because they all know, whether they admit it or not, they all know that their vision is going, their hearing is going, that cognitively speaking, they're not as sharp as they used to be, and a lot of them are going to be ashamed of that even, and would not admit it. Much like in the same way that 80% of people who have disabilities have invisible disabilities, and a lot of them are just not talking about them, because why would they? So all these things are there. So you can play on all of those things, and try to touch like a sensitive chord in that person. So I would say that my strategy basically is pretty simple, is I try to learn as much as possible about that person. If it means stalking them on social media, I might do that, maybe. I do. And just try to, like, are they giving out cues about anything? Like, do they have a kid that has a disability? Have they mentioned something at some point that might lead to thinking that they might have something? And then you play on that one chord. And again, these 8 personas might be a really good way for you to do that. If you know that your boss or senior leadership in your company, for instance, is someone who is, well, let's say colorblind, because I know that one very personally. And you show them, so here's an example, and you show them two versions of a document, one that has really good contrast and the other one that doesn't, and you ask them to tell you which one they prefer and why. And you said, this is one example, and then you can start building on that. As soon as you make a little breach, it gets a lot easier to get in. And then if you can back that up with something financial, it's much easier. It's like the fight's already won in most cases.
Yeah, and one thing you've also mentioned that I think could help us advocate for these things is, you've mentioned these links I put in the chat today. Hopefully everybody's clicked those and bookmarked those. But as you mentioned, those are free resources that they could also show other people and say, did you realize some of these things? A lot of people, I will say, Denis, really commented on your quiz and helped that, how it helped them with self-reflection, because I think you and I would agree in our advocacy, sometimes the awareness isn't there until you start talking about it. And then someone says, oh, I didn't realize I did that, or I realized I didn't do that. Right. And so I think that's another way you can definitely help leaders be self-aware, is allow them to find out from themselves of, well, am I an inclusive speaker, and how do I do it? Denis, I want to leave you with the last word. Is there anything you want to make sure we remember from your conversation as participants?
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day, kind of thing. It's not getting there that matters as much as doing a bunch of small little things regularly, checking yourself regularly, being relentless in terms of analyzing what you're doing, asking others if they notice anything, which, again, I guess it's one of my asks. If you noticed anything that I did that clearly went against what I was talking about today, please let me know, because I'm also on that path, right? And none of us are perfect. But it's not so much something that I want to share in that sense, more than a commitment to accessibility with all this material. For one thing, all this stuff that's free will remain free. I have no intention of putting that behind the paywall. That's just not who I am. I am, however, asking for email addresses so that I can put you on a mailing list, because I want to send you more of that stuff. So hopefully you like the stuff, so you want more of it. So that's what I'm trading it for. The extra material that's there. But I do have a commitment on accessibility. So like I said, I know nothing about publishing, right? This is my first book, and I don't know. I'm discovering as I'm going. But what I know is that there needs to be an accessible version of that document somewhere, somehow, whether it's an EPUB or something else, an HTML version. There needs to be something that will allow everyone to be able to read through it with assistive technologies, for instance. So that will come, just like everything else. So that is a commitment that I make to all of you. And if for whatever reason you cannot access this material, get a hold of me. Again, if you go to that page, you'll get my information. I'm very easy to contact. The A11Y Slack channel is also running. I'm seeing messages go through here. Can't really look at them right now, but I'm there. I'm easy to find. If for whatever reason you need support, I will get you the material. If $199 is something you can afford, let me know. I will give it to you. I don't really care. I didn't write this for money. I wrote this for changing the world in a better way through sharing something that was all over the place, but had not been put together yet. And I kind of think that I did. So I want people to benefit from that as much as possible.
And I can't put it any better, Denis. Thank you very much for changing the world, for putting that material together so we can be aware of how we can reach out to our fellow human beings more and be inclusive. I hopefully echo those comments of the participants. I can't thank you enough for sharing your time, your experience with us today. I thought this is an awesome close to many of our AxeCon sessions that we've had today. I want to thank the participants for being attending AxeCon. And as mentioned, if you love Denis' t-shirt, please give us that feedback so we can continue to make AxeCon better every year. So we'd love to hear you back. Also want to thank our ASL interpreters. They've done a fantastic job of doing interpretation for us. As Denis and I both said to their group before we started, we got to remember to speak slower, and both Nicole and Tammy said, come at it, we'll interpret for you. So thank you very much.
And
for
clearly
doing
I failed at that too, but
that.
thank you everyone. Also really appreciate you being here, and yeah, reach out if there's anything I can share with you to help you down that journey, down that path.
Thank you, team, and hopefully you can change the world. Thank you and have a great day. Thanks.